All right, welcome. Thanks for joining today. We're putting on just our final 2024 webinar, so thanks for making the time. We're going to be talking about how do you engage your internal compass, and I thought it was kind of timely considering that we're wrapping up a year that we've seen all this talk about AI. There's a lot of stuff going on in politics. There's things going on in organizations. We saw a lot of our clients have changes and sometimes changes they didn't expect. And so, just with all that going on, how do you stay sane through all of that? And so, today, that's what we're going to tap into. I wanted to give some tips as we're going into the holiday season to try to keep our sanity and try to build a little bit of our own focus, if you will, and see this attached to a bit of self-care, as well as skill development and leadership development. So when we're looking at this, when it comes to your internal compass, I'm going to go into biology a little bit, and believe me, biology was not my favorite topic, but in school, but it is followed me everywhere I went in terms of really being able to tap into the best sides of ourselves as well as our performance. So the first thing that we're looking at is think about your brain and consider the different sides of the brain. And by all means, some of you are going to be professionals at this at a neurological level that I can't touch. So I'm breaking it down for all my fellow peers and friends that kind of look at this from just kind of the basics. So first we have our midbrain, or the posterior side of our brain, and that's usually where our wiring for physical survival sits. And so a lot of people will reference this as the reptilian brain, but it's that idea of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And then we've got the what I'll call the looking good mode. Now, the looking good mode is still attached to that midbrain, but it's almost straddling two sides of our brain. It's the understanding that I'm not in a physical threat situation, but I also have to monitor my physical threat situation. And so what it's straddling is the frontal lobe and the midbrain. And the frontal lobe is more of that capacity for us to step outside of a situation, reflect on what's going on, think about and consider what are my thoughts that are showing up? How do I want to engage with something? And so our frontal lobe is honestly relatively new in comparison to how long the midbrain has been around. So in terms of evolution, the midbrain has been around for as long as we've been kind of trotting the earth. The frontal lobe started to develop when we started to develop our capacity for language. So I always like to describe the midbrain as like this Olympic runner just ready to go, and the frontal lobe being a little bit more like a baby leg learning how to walk. And what happens is we've got these three mindsets. And when we talk about, we should thrive versus survive, sometimes we don't understand just kind of what's stacked against us to really get into that thriving mode. We are wired for that physical survival. And I'm hoping that as most of you are going through the holidays and moving into 2025, that the emphasis isn't on physical survival as much as it is on interpersonal survival, at least when it comes to the workplace. So when we talked about kind of finding our internal compass, I wanted us to get in touch with our minds and what's going on there. Oh, got a great question here. Are some, or maybe it's a comment on humanity. Are some people more wired to live in survival mode versus thriving mode? I think we're all honestly wired for the survival mode. Oh, I love it. Comment ready to thrive in 2025. Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready too. But back to that question of are some people more wired? I do think it's a matter of habit and intention that we have to move over into this thriving mode, and that's what today is really about. But if a lot of times if we're not self-aware of the fact that we might be sitting in survival mode, we all do it. I'll say this, all of us are wired just from generations of finding physical safety and survival being the more dominant thing that we're focused on. So if you're working with someone who's kind of showing up really survivalist and you think you're just a calm, cool cucumber, just remember that it's all situational, but we've all got that kind of ready to go. Am I safe? So how do we get intentional about this? I want to talk about the three different mindsets in here. So if we are ready to thrive, I love that. That should be a t-shirt. You better copyright that right now because Thrive in 2025, that's like that's gonna sell out. Put some glitter on it, we're good to go. Okay, so when we talk about these mindsets, let's look at the survival mindset. One, so you can recognize it in yourself and then also recognize it in others. And I always kind of describe it as when we feel like we're drowning. What tends to show up is we get really concerned. You'll start to notice that you're getting concerned about protecting your turf, your territory, the space that you're in, or you'll see others kind of fighting for that territorial stuff. And we may see it as egotistical or that they're just competitive, but in reality, it's a survival mode. There's definitely a feeling of there's not enough to go around. So how do I hold on to what I have? Um, the behaviors, they'll withhold information, a lot of accusatory towards others, and they're not going to share anything. It's just, I'm on this life raft all by myself. What's hard about that is we don't always recognize that in the workplace or even on as you're having your holiday dinners, you may just think your uncle or your aunt is just driving you nuts and super defensive, and they may be in survival mode for whatever reason. Um, so we can come across as uncooperative. We're often seen as uncaring during that time because if I'm fighting for my own life raft and I'm kicking others off of it, I'm not going to come across as the cuddliest person. And our brain is really wired to seeing the problems in things. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm thinking about what I've noticed, happening over the last probably the last year, but a little bit of a surge these last couple of months is this sense of all the bad news. So I'm noticing in my social media, these are the bad things, the world is, dangerous and bad stuff. And I'm not denying any of those things are happening, but I also am aware that how much am I focusing on all the things that are going wrong? It's that whole, like, if it bleeds, it leads. Well, there's a reason for it because our survivor brain kind of kicks in, goes, oh, I better pay attention to that because I've got to physically survive. And if there's physical danger out there, I want to track it. What does that mean? And for us, it may mean not physical danger on the streets, depending on where you're living, but it may mean what's my financial danger because finances pay for a roof over our head, which leads to physical survival for our food. I know a big, this is not a political discussion today, but I know a big debate was the cost of food during the elections because all those things really tap into what are, keeping us alive. So food, shelter, those types of things. Now what's hard about that is our brain is looking for those problems, kind of like we're looking for all the dinosaurs out there that are chasing us, so that it's not being set up with the task to look for anything that's working. So this is where, when we talk about tapping into our internal compass, we have to direct what our brain is focused on absorbing. And part of that is, not sticking our head in the sand and ignoring the fact that there's things going on in the world that affect us. And also we should care about others, whether it's affecting ourselves or not. But it is about getting clear as to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We're going to get into that. A goal is going to be critical to help you really prioritize what it is that you're taking in and what it is that you're letting go. Because, never before have we had so much access to information. That before it was, here's the information you get to have, enjoy. And now there's a whole host of stuff out there and it's really up to you to pick and choose. So how do you do that so that you're not kind of mining this influx of things that are setting you up to be in even that much more survival mode? So one, let's just recognize it. On one hand, have compassion with yourself. Recognize that when you're in survivor mode, you're just not going to see opportunity as clearly as you will when you're in thriving mode. And so it's a little bit of, is there a way for me to get out of survivor mode? Also, let's have some compassion when we're meeting with people. And this doesn't mean like just, excuse poor behavior and let it slide, turn the other cheek and just deal with it. It's more of, if I can come from a compassionate place, then maybe I can kind of set the temperature at a different level in the conversations, as well as not increase my stress levels because someone's not showing up the way that I would prefer. Okay, so if this is surviving, let's move to the next one here, which is looking good. This is survival's cousin. And this is how we all, a lot of us have been groomed to show up at work, is like underneath there's this buzz of, are they going to notice my proposal? Or am I going to get, airtime in the meeting? Is my manager, did they give me good eye contact, or was that a strange look? Like, we're monitoring all these little micro moments on the job, the tone in the email, That's our survivor mode kind of working in the background. Looking good mode is what we tend to use when we don't see imminent danger, but we understand that to survive in the I'm using the workplace as a primary one, but that doesn't mean that we don't use it in our personal life. But to look good, and this is where we kind of come up with, how do I make sure that I say the right thing? How do I present myself? And the focus is very much how am I looking to others? But it's really just a little bit of a baby step away from survival mode. It just might be dressed up a little bit better. We have better manners in looking good mode. And we tend to kind of show up as always busy. That doesn't mean that we're always productive, but we're always busy. We're looking for reinforcement of our status a lot when we're in looking good mode, because our status in a lot of situations will make us feel like we're grounded in our safety. So when I'm career coaching and I'm talking to folks, I get a lot of, how do I get promoted? How do I get raised? And I'll talk to them, what's the purpose of the promotion and the raise? What is it that you're looking to use that for? And more often than not, there's not really a purpose behind it. It's that they're collecting things. And I get it because we're kind of groomed to see this way, collecting things, the status of stuff, which we in turn view as giving us grounded, kind of more security, versus, oh, I'm doing this because I'm going to get access to this other level of work that I want to do. Now, I'm not saying that some are coming from that place, but I'd say the majority of people that I talk to out of the gate, it's really just I'm trying to kind of collect things that give me a ground to stand on. We may even get stuck in, but this is the way we've always done things. As much as we want to look good, we get stuck in, but we've always done it this way. And the fear is if we change it, what if I'm not the subject matter expert anymore? So I'm going to lose some of my status if I go in doing something out of my comfort zone and I'm just brand new. Oh, someone just shared, this is exactly what my team is going through now. Yeah, it's, once again, how do we have some compassion for that? That when we're going through a major change, and this is, I really want you to get that people, when you say like, oh, people are so resistant to change, and we can just kind of see them as, curmudgeons or old school or whatever it might be. And a lot of times it's we're threatening what they view as their way of holding ground in terms of their job security, reputation, that type of thing. What's hard is when you're sitting on the outside, a lot of times what you might see is actually them not changing is what's hurting their job security. But it's so hard when you're in it, when you're in looking good mode and even survival mode. I want you to get that our lens and our scope of seeing things it's very narrow. We're very much, our brain is on the hunt for the thing to prove that, do I look good? Do I look good? Do I look good? Or am I safe? Am I safe? So to move from that to this thriving mode, since we're going to thrive in 2025, like I said, you better copyright that. So when we're thriving in 2025, what does that mean? I don't think the flow of information is going to stop. I don't think the just a abundance of scary stuff out there is going to go away. I think it's going to be that we've really got to get disciplined around how we leverage our mindset. And I was talking to someone earlier this week and we were going through a workshop and they were just, oh, this is what I don't like about this stuff is that people just want you to just, you're kind of getting gaslit that this other bad stuff is happening and, oh, never mind, just focus on the rainbows and the unicorns. And I disagree. It's not about that. It is about this idea of I need to be very clear. Am I actually in physical danger right now? And and when I say physical threat, I know that there's some that are worried about their jobs and their job security, and that's triggering a sense of physical threat. And what I try to remind them is the more we can still keep you in thriving mode thought process, the more strategic you can be about what you're doing right now. And so even though job security connects to our physical survival, it is not an imminent physical threat. It feels that way. And I know that you might be thinking about, well, how am I going to pay my bills in 2 months? Or how am I going to pay my bill in 1 week? Whatever it might be. But really in this moment, if you're not getting chased by something, you know, once again, I want to go back to, there's a difference between true physical imminent threat, which is what that part of the brain was wired, the midbrain was wired to navigate. More often than not, we are better off leveraging this frontal lobe and being able to sit back, consider, and choose. And so when you're looking at the thriving mode, it just tends to be able to, it's not this narrow focus. We're relaxed, we're able to sit back. The analogy I give is if you watch, animals out and about, I like to think of a deer in the meadow. And a deer in the meadow is, eating grass and kind of casually looking around. But if it hears a sound in the background, it's all of a sudden it freezes for a second and then it's probably going to dart off. And it's darting off with its eyes very much laser focused on the next exit route, right? And what's interesting about animals, if anybody has ever read about some studies around trauma and how animals kind of process stress, is that animals, let's say that deer who runs away from a potential predator, when it gets to a place that it perceives as safe, it does this interesting vibration of things where it's releasing a lot of those stress hormones, and there's the sweating and everything. That's why there's often the recommendation of to go work out and to actually work up a sweat to release some of the toxins from that. But animals have a vibration of almost a buzzing that kind of shakes that out of them. Us as humans, unless you're going to tell me different, maybe you have a different experience. I don't have that capacity. So the walking, the running, those types of things, but also some of it is I'm not in a meadow with a potential lion in the field. I'm really not. And so we want to make sure that we're not engaging in a situation that's actually not the best strategy. So I'm going to venture to say that I'll give it a random number, 90% of what you're going through, you're actually in physical safety, and it's interpersonal safety or short-term safety, long-term concern of physical safety, such as job security that pays the bills and a roof over your head, that type of thing. But in that moment, most likely, if you're not in that physical danger, what I'm going to say is your best friend is going to be finding that mindset of thriving and going to this. So we're making decisions based off of an actual strategic vision, meaning I want to accomplish something. I'm not just sitting here surviving what's getting thrown at me. We tend to be more collaborative because we're not threatened by other people's ideas. We're not threatened by what they bring to the table. We're excited by it. We're not threatened about disappearing if it's not our idea. We get that, working together, we can do some cool things. We trust things are going to work out for us. We actually ask for help, admit that we're not good at stuff because there's no fear of that. There's why wouldn't I admit that I don't know something? Someone might be able to help me. That's kind of the thought process around it. And we look at challenges with curiosity. I wonder what I'm going to do about this. And notice in that message, I wonder what I'm going to do about this. There's a little bit of unspoken confidence in ourselves of like, well, I'll figure this out. I figured all these other things. I just don't know how I'm going to do this one. But this is a little bit of an adventure that I'm going on. Now imagine saying those messages to yourself in the face of uncertainty and unknown versus, oh my gosh, here's all the things I'm going to lose and this is what's going to go wrong. And I understand that. I understand very well. I'm a big user of hypervigilance in all the wrong ways sometimes. So I understand this kind of embedded habit of if I'm not clocking all the things that could go wrong, I'll be ill prepared. And it's a bit of a lie we tell ourselves to feel more certain, because what happens is when we're clocking all the things that can go wrong, you tell me if I'm wrong, we're not actually using a whole lot of our imagination. What I find is that with myself and with people that I'm coaching, we're not using imagination. We're using kind of a library in our mind of things that have gone wrong in the past, things that we've been told. Maybe, if you're anything like me, I've had, my mother warning me of all the things that she went through to prevent me from going through it, but really she just added to my library of things to track for, right? So it's actually a history catalog. It's not a future telling kind of crystal ball, but it feels like it is. We feel smarter because we're looking at things that are tangible. This has happened. It didn't happen to me. It happened to somebody else. There's proof that it could. And we're missing that just as likely, and maybe more likely, I don't know what the odds are, just as likely we could catalog all the good things that have happened, but I don't find that we catalog the history of the good things working out. We tend to only catalog the things that we perceive as dangerous because our midbrain is absolutely looking for physical survival and the threat. So we don't have this library of history that we tend to tap into as easily, like, well, look at all the times that things actually worked out when it looked like it wasn't going to. I don't remember my mother telling me the stories of all the wonderful ways that life worked out for her. but she was alive by the time I came along, so things worked out. Maybe not the way that she wanted, but she's got just as much of a history of things working out. So this goes a little bit of what do I want to kind of put in the library? And I'm not saying get rid of all the possible negative aspects, but I'm going to dare you to see if you can start collecting some of the positive memories and at least make a balance. Like if I'm going to go in your library, I'd like to at least see half the section is this and half the section is that. Give me something to hunt for. Give me at least a little variety in there. And so, thriving part of it is what am I choosing to collect? And then the other part of it is this, am I curious? Because what I love about curiosity is it's actually giving your brain instructions to go on a hunt, to go look for something with the assumption that it's there. I'm looking for you to find the solution, and I'm just wondering what it is. I believe it's there. I'm just not sure what it is. That's what I'm curious about. Versus, I don't think there's a solution, but good luck. Your brain's not going to go on a hunt for that. Your brain's going to go, okay, there's no solution. So let's get busy surviving what this current situation is. So curiosity, which then leads to this magical thing, imagination, and our ability to, like I said, instead of just cataloging and going through all the history of the bad things, we think it's our imagination because it's happening in our head, but really an imagination conjuring up things that we hadn't thought of before. Getting, when we have that little light bulb moment, when all of a sudden we spot something that we didn't spot before, a lot of that is because we're in thriving mode and we're not looking like this, we're like this, and we've sent our brain on the mission of, we believe good stuff is out there. Now go find it for me. And so you're going to notice things that you didn't notice before. You're going to spot opportunities. There's a great, I love him as an author, Shirzad Shamin. I'll make sure that when I send out the recording of this, I'll include a link to his stuff. But he talks about, he's got a book, Positive Intelligence. He's got a whole website on it, and you can even take a great free assessment on his website. And it talks about, what are your saboteurs, basically your survival modes that are getting in the way of your ability to kind of be in that thriving mode. But it is that idea of, can you spot opportunities in the midst of chaos and challenge? And I find that part of being able to do that is to sit back and go, I'm just going to believe this is going to work out in my favor somehow. So the trick that I'll give myself is I am just going to flash forward a year, and I'm going to tell myself that I'm in the best possible position a year from now. If that is true, without a doubt, how would I want to tackle this challenge that I'm faced with right now? And what I'm doing is I'm removing off the table that I'm in danger. Look, I survive. A year later, I'm thrilled and I'm happy. So how would I want to tackle this? And I started doing that because there was a point where I had shown up in a coffee shop years ago, and I walked in to get a coffee, and it felt very familiar to me. And it'd been a long time since I was in that area. And I realized, like, oh, this is the coffee shop I was in. I came for an interview. I'd just been laid off. It was in my 20s. I did not have rent for the next month. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I applied to every job under the sun. Like, I didn't care if they were looking for elephant trainers. I was like, I once hugged an elephant. Like, I'm in, like, get me in. But this was a job, interesting enough, for executive coaching. And I hadn't done executive coaching as a formal kind of job yet. I'd been in, managed teams, and I'd been in charge of some learning, but not executive coaching. But I applied, and the gentleman was willing to meet with me. And I remember sitting with him, and he was like, I think he kind of, I was in my early 20s, and he was, I think, in his mid 50s. When you're in your mid 20s, you think everybody's in their mid 50s. So who knows? He could have been 30. He was sitting down. It just was really lovely, and having this interview with me. And he says, well, have you ever done executive coaching before? And I was, sure, I tell executives what to do all the time. Never afraid of an opinion. And, so he had just this kind of smile and was lovely, and just kind of gave me advice. If this is really what you want to do, here's the experiences to collect and that type of thing. But I remember leaving that coffee shop, just all I could see was I did not get the job. And all I was obsessed with is, how am I going to pay my rent the next month, which is a fair thing to be worried about, but in that pure survivor mode. Now, here I am years later in this coffee shop. I'd been executive coach for several years, even forgot that conversation ever happened. And I thought, oh, well, now that I'm in the position that I can pay, I was in a position, that I pay my rent, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this person who's in her 20s and scared out of her mind. What would I want to tell her? And, sure, it's easy to sit there and go, everything's going to be fine. Like, just enjoy the ride. Everything's going to be fine. You figure it out. but it's easier to do that in hindsight than to do in the moment. But I realized to really tap into your thriving mode, you've got to be able to do that. So, a couple of things when you're engaging your thriving mindset, you want to make sure that you're separating the external locus of control versus internal. And where I came across this is in a Cosmo magazine well, I was in the military and I was miserable. And they're like, if you have an internal locus of control, you're going to have higher levels of life satisfaction. I'm like, I want that. And so all this really is, if you look at this, each person has the same experience. One's in the middle and the world is coming in at them, which is maybe what it feels like right now. And it feels like we're just trying to hold on to the good stuff and hope the bad stuff doesn't hit us too hard. The big difference between internal and external locus of control just relies on the fact that this person is in movement towards something that's meaningful to them. The outside environment's still going to come at you. It's not going to change. But when we have a goal, we start to really pick and choose what is it that we're going to absorb and what is it that's not a priority. Just like if you're in California and you go, I want to go on a trip, you might get kind of caught up in whether or not your car works well. But if you have a goal and a destination, I'm going to take a trip to New York, then your car may not even be involved because you'll be flying there. So you wouldn't even spend time thinking about whether or not your car is working. So that's a little bit of how this works is you're getting that internal and you're tapping into the goal. The second thing you're doing is you're separating what happened from what we're experiencing. This is what our frontal lobe does. And we've got a discipline, and it's a nice little practice where this happened. What am I telling myself about it? And then what is my emotion? What emotions am I experiencing? What behaviors am I having? And this understanding that the story part is the part that we control. So what happens, we don't have control over all the time. Like we just don't. And that's the scary part of life. But it is this idea of, okay, but I can choose the story that I tell. And the story has to be something that your brain will go, I can buy that. It can't be, I'm just going to, sugarcoat this and pretend that it's better than what it is. It's got to be something that you can believe in. Those of you who've worked with me know that a lot of times I'll say, remind people, you're a business owner, not an employee. You just decided to set up shop underneath a company's larger umbrella, but you're still getting paid to deliver a service. You do your taxes differently. You don't have to go hunt for the work. There's a lot of benefits to this, but you're a business owner. Now, here's the thing. That's a different story than being an employee. What I find is it invites people to be less reactive. So their emotions are a little bit more, I feel empowered. I feel confident. That makes me show up differently. It's true. You are a business owner who just files your taxes. Maybe you're not incorporated, but you're getting paid to deliver a service. So it's just a matter of which story sets you up to feel and do in a way that really supports you. The last one is really tapping into that thriving mindset. And like I said, this is the little, we'll be sending you a little worksheet on this, but it's picking your goal. What's that purpose? Being really purposeful of it. That's bigger than the world around you. It's not just getting the holiday shopping done this year. It's what impact do I want to make by this time next year? I like to even go further of like, what do I want my life to be about? And then how do I line things up? But start small right now if you're feeling overwhelmed. What do I want my week to be about? What do I want my day to be about? And then what you're doing is now you're going to look at your current reality. But first, you're going to look at what's working in my favor. Then you're going to look at what are the blocks that I need to prioritize? Not the 50 that are floating out there, but what are the 3 that are most important? And now what are the initial steps that I'm going to take to make that happen? It's a very simple kind of practical tool, but it can pull, I've used this for myself and I've used this for clients to pull you out of whatever kind of overwhelming situation or malaise that you might find yourself in. So how do you stay fueled for the journey? I want to close out with this little visual is one, gratitude goes a long way. And the things that you're sincerely grateful for, but being able to notice that no matter how small the thing is, and your community, really picking people that are close to you. When we work with a lot of people, we're around a lot of people, but you want to find your close-knit community that are supporting you and able to kind of fuel you up and support you for the journey. And in turn, that you're also demonstrating this generosity. And the way that I look at it is the more gratitude and generosity we're feeding into the community, the more that the community feeds back to us. And ideally, that's what you're creating. And so being very careful with those things, being intentional about it and understanding that Your life is more important than whatever that meme is that just, threw your mood off or whatever that eye roll was in the meeting. So take the time to maybe over this holiday season, think about, what is it that you want your goal to be? And how can you create a good flow in your community and really using that internal locus of control. As always, we're here to help. Be sure to reach out. We're available for thought partnership, just if you're trying to figure out what's the best development for you, your team, or your organization. We've got training available, coaching. Check out our catalog. We've got the QR code here, give you a sense of all the different topics that we cover, as well as our next coming up 2025 first webinar, which is strategic goal setting. You're going to get a chance to see our team discuss how we approach goal setting and how we've helped our clients set that up for success so that it actually has an impact throughout the year. Feel free to click on the QR code. It's going to be January 28th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll see you there. All right, folks. Thank you so much for participating today. Thanks for the little comments. Love seeing them. I hope you all have a phenomenal holiday season. And I look forward to seeing you all in the Thriving 2025. Thrive in 2025. I love it. We'll see you there.